It is time once again for the LassoCast annual Top 10 Best of Video. Both Danny and I have put together a list of 10 movies each that were our absolute favorite horror movies of such a great year for horror. The video is extra long and it actually originally premiered on my Facebook page. You can just go ahead and go over to the PR Marsh author page on Facebook and you can see the whole video right now, unedited. But I've done you guys the favor of editing it down and adding clips from all of these great movies that we're talking about. You can just sit back and relax and watch our first part of this video, which includes my picks and Danny's picks for numbers 10 through 6 for the best horror movies of 2022. And make sure that you subscribe to the LassoCast because a week from now I will post a follow-up video which will have our entries for numbers 5 through 1, the best horror movie of the year. Alright, so without further ado, please enjoy the video. Danny, you want to tell us what your number 10 is?
My number 10 is a movie that my horror movie loving daughter almost had to be taken out of the movie theater in tears, and that is Smile.
Nice.
I would have never, when I saw the trailer for Smile, I never would have thought that this was going to make my top 10 list. This felt like, pardon my expression, this felt like the most basic bitch horror movie.
Oh, Jesus.
Like, this felt like something that should have come out. This felt like something that would have come out like almost a decade ago, like in the vein of Ouija or not hide and seek, Truth or Dare.
Yeah.
Like one of those real cheap Blumhouse horror movies that makes a profit in its opening weekend, but is critically panned. That's what this movie looked like it was going to be. And total credit to director Parker Finn, total credit to the cast. They took the simplest premise and they made it one of the creepiest movies of the year. Mm-hmm. And this movie, better than almost any I've seen this year, perfected the jump scares. Yes, they're a cliche, and yes, the movie relies on them a little too much, but it hit the jump scares perfectly. And, I use Charlotte as a bellwether sometimes. Very few horror movies have made her a complete wreck. There's been very few movies where I've had to stop in the middle, pause the stream, pause the DVD. This is a girl who watched The Exorcist at 9. And not joking, probably 5 minutes into Smile, she was huddled up on the chair next to me in the movie theater, already crying, basically asking to leave 15 minutes in. And like the good father I am, I made her sit there and watch the whole movie. And I posted a very funny before and after picture before the movie. She was super confident. She took a picture in front of the poster with the big grin on her face. And then when the movie ended, I took a picture of her in the car and she was just a mess of tears. Any movie that can scare somebody that much. And again, I know Charlotte's only 12. She was 11 when she saw it, but this is a girl who's seen her share of horror movies. And has never been affected like that, especially in the movie theater. So I had to pay tribute to Parker Finn and the movie by putting it in my top 10 because of the great jump scares and because I visibly watched it have an effect on another person. And not many movies can do that. So credit to that movie, credit to Smile.
Now we're moving on to my number 10, which is, you can see it right in the top right corner of our screen, Prey, which is the 5th Predator movie. It's the 5th in the series. It was a bit of a shocker for a lot of people, I think, this year. I don't think anyone was thinking that there was going to be a really great Predator movie that was going to come out. I personally like the Predator franchise. There's certain low points. The movie The Predator is pretty bad. That's the most recent one besides this one. But I love the movie Predators. Of course, there's the original with Arnold, and I like Predator 2. This movie, though, Prey, it is very detached from the other movies. It takes place in 1719. There is a female protagonist, unlike in all the other films. And it was this very stripped down movie that sometimes felt more like in line with like The Revenant than it did with the other Predator movies. And so, um, it stars Amber Midthunder, and I think this might have been a star-making role for her. I think that people were so into her and her dog in the movie that if they were to make a direct sequel, which they don't normally do in the Predator franchise, I think people would be on board for a Prey 2. But the Predator itself that's in the movie has this great design. It's very unique.
Yeah.
We discussed it because we've also always on the Lastercast reviewed the Alien movies, and then whenever there's been any kind of Alien versus Predator discussion, we've had it on this channel and also on Comic Books Transformed. So we've talked about the Predator a few times on this channel.
Those are, I think that it tells you so much about the 2022 year when you get these big franchise entries and we're acknowledging that some of them were good, that we enjoyed them. Scream, Hellraiser. And yeah, you have Prey, but it's number 10 on your list, and then we don't have any more of them going forward. So the rest are probably mostly original concept horror movies or foreign horror films, which I'm really looking forward to talk about.
Yes, my number 9 is the movie Watcher, which premiered on Shudder. It is basically about a woman who moves to Bucharest, which is the capital of Romania. She moves there with her husband because he has a job there. He's from Romania, and she sees a man looking at her from across the crowded city street, and she sees him in an apartment building. There's tons of big apartment windows that are open, and she can look at all these different lives, kind of like Rear Window. But she sees this one guy, and she's very creeped out by him. It also turns out that there is a serial killer known as the Spider killing women in the city. And so you think that maybe he might potentially be the killer. So I'm actually a big fan of Rear Window. I love Alfred Hitchcock. This movie was compared to Rear Window. It's also like that movie Disturbia with, Shia LaBeouf, or even going to like Fright Night. It's like that kind of feeling of like, you're watching something from out your window. You're the only person that sees certain things and nobody else around you believes you. I think this movie is very well done. For me, you'll probably see from this list, but like atmosphere and tension are my main selling points for horror movies. If there's this immersive atmosphere and there's this tension throughout, then I'm pretty much going to enjoy the movie. So it's directed by Chloe Okuno, and it stars Micah Monroe. She's Julia, and her husband is Carl Glusman. And I really liked it. My wife really liked it too. Is it on your list by any chance?
It is. I mentioned this to Pete before we started. Full disclosure, I'm a complete cheat. I have 14 movies in my top 10. I'll just put that up as that I'm bad at math. But also, I found a lot of movies that had similarities, and I kind of grouped them together. So this movie is grouped with another movie, but it's in my number. It's in my tied for 5th slot. I loved this movie. When I saw it, when we did our mid-year horror review, we did a mid-year review back in like June or July, and this was my number 1 of the mid-year. I loved this movie. And you hit it right out of the park. This is one of the best modern Shakespearean, Hitchcockian films that I can remember watching, where it was so obvious, where I'm watching it and I'm going, blonde protagonist being, haunted by this unknown fear that maybe it's in her head, maybe it's real. I was like, she's in another country, nobody understands her. I'm like, this is friggin' Alfred Hitchcock to a T, but it's done really, really well. I love Chloe Okuno. She directed the all-time part of VHS 1994, Hail Rotma. She's a really good filmmaker. When you ask Micah Monroe to be afraid of a looming presence in the distance, as she did in It Follows, That's when she brings out her best acting.
Yeah.
She's really good in this movie. And what I love the most about this movie is up until the last 10 minutes, you don't know if what's going on in the movie is real, if it's in her head, if this guy is the serial killer, if he's not. We're going to try to be as spoiler free as possible in this year-end review, so I'll stop there.
For those of you that are following at home, Danny watched like 72 horror movies this year from
Like
2022.
74.
74, okay. And I watched about a third of that. So my list is much more streamlined. I don't have any honorable mentions, but I'd like to hear what yours are.
I mean, it was such a great year for horror that I watched 74 movies. I had a list of about 25 that I had to cut down to 10. And then I cheated on my top 10 by making it a top 14 by having some ties in there. But just throwing out some titles, Hellbender, which is on Shudder, super fun little movie. Incantation, foreign film on Netflix, scary as heck. Probably the most exciting thing that the MCU has produced since Endgame, Werewolf by Night. I'm counting it as a horror movie.
Sure.
Absolutely loved it. 45 minutes, and it left me excited for Marvel to do more of that.
Sure.
A movie that Pete and I talked a lot about in a review together at the end of the year, the Adult Swim Yule Log, which is one of the craziest, most bonkers movies you'll ever watch. It was so much fun. Orphan First Kill is an honorable mention for me because it has one of the most absolutely insane twists of any movie I've seen this year. Because you walk into that movie thinking, how are they freaking doing this movie? And then there's a twist in it where you go, okay, forget it. I don't care. That's amazing. Prey. We mentioned Prey, of course. The Sadness, which is probably the most disgusting, or at least tied up with another movie for most disgusting movie of the year. That is on Shudder. That was honorable mention for me. We're All Going to the World's Fair was a really weird little movie that was creepy as hell. And the last one on my, probably the two most popular movies that will appear on other people's lists that are probably numbers, if I was going to have 12 and 11, Bodies, 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 which I thought was so much fun. And it's a movie I will definitely rewatch. I absolutely adored that movie. Just missed my list. And this might be a shock, a movie that, again, we talked about in a video on our channel, just missing my top 10 is Nope by Jordan Peele.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
Just missing my list.
Okay.
So
interesting.
So with those, see, now I get the sense that it's in your top 10 based on your reaction, but I won't spoil anything. So my number 9, and I think you've seen both of these movies, so I think you can understand why I put them together. Barbarian and Fresh.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So Fresh is directed by Mimi Cave. It is a fantastic movie with Sebastian Stan and Daisy Edgar Jones.
Yeah.
And for the first 30 minutes of this movie, if you didn't know what you were watching, if you didn't read any descriptions, you'd think you were watching a charming little Hallmark romantic comedy.
Yes.
Barbarian, which is directed by Zach Kreger, also starts, and for 30 minutes, you're not sure what you're really watching. And you're like, is this a movie about Bill Skarsgård is like a serial killer? Or no, they're actually bringing up all of these things that we're thinking. So maybe he's just a genuinely good guy. Maybe this movie is maybe they're, him and the lead actress are going to be a couple. And then at the 30-minute mark of both of these movies, some absolutely crazy plot twist occurs that reveals what the movie is actually about. And you get two really good horror movies. I couldn't separate them because they were so similar in that kind of fooled you, like pull the veil over your eyes.
Right.
You know, oh, you almost forget that you're watching a horror movie when you're watching this. Barbarian is fantastic. I think it's the I don't know. I've never seen an interview with Zach Kreger, but it feels like it was a modern day interpretation of Castle Freak.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I know that, you know, Chris mentioned in his review that he didn't like the ending. And I've spoken to a lot of people who think that it went 5-10 minutes too long and the ending got a little too ridiculous. And I
Okay.
tend to agree, but the movie took so many crazy chances and
Right.
did so many weird things that I didn't want to leave it out of my top 10. And as far as fresh goes, this was a phenomenally, like you said, you know, it doesn't have to have a high kill count if it's like a really well-made movie with a lot of tension. And
Yeah.
this movie was a really well-made movie. Two fantastic lead performances from Daisy Edgar Jones and Sebastian Stan. And because both of these movies have these weird, you know, prolonged introductions that kind of trick you into thinking there's something else, and then they reveal really original horror concepts, uh, I had to group them together as my joint number 9.
The one that I had for number 8, I'm kind of curious if it's on your list, but I have the movie Moloch, which was on Shudder. Okay, there's a trend with horror movies I saw at least this year where it seems like there's horrible fates for little kids. And that happens a few times on this list for me. I think that I've probably noticed this because I'm a parent. I have a 12-year-old and I have a 6-year-old. I have little girls. That also seems to be a trend with these horror movies. It seems to be horror happening to little girls. But one of the biggest fears is when a parental figure or the actual parent is the monster or is connected to some kind of horror. In the case of Moloch, there is a generational curse that affects this one family. That's a little bit of a spoiler, but you learn it pretty early on. There's something to do with this family and this curse, which this is a Dutch horror film. This is another foreign horror film. It was on Shudder, so I have quite a few movies from Shudder on this list. And it was directed by Nico van de Brink, and it stars Sally Harmson as Beatrix, who's the main character, and also Alexandra Williamune, who's Jonas, who's like the male, like the love interest or whatever in the movie. A lot of the movies that I like have pretty rough endings, and so my favorite horror movie of all time is the original Wicker Man with Christopher Lee, which so much of it is just tension, tension, tension throughout. What is going on? What is the deal? There's something that's not being revealed. And at the very end, there's that kind of gut punch. There's one movie
I don't
on
know what
this.
you're talking about. I remember the ending of The Wicker Man where everyone was happy and dancing.
Well, that is
Oh,
also
yes, you
true.
mean the guy burning alive. Yes, okay, yeah.
Yes, spoilers for the Wicker Man. But I just this movie once again really has an atmosphere. The cinematography is great. It has this setting which is in this like wooded setting in like this European countryside, and it's just spooky as hell just to look at. It's supernatural, so the supernatural stuff that we see in it is pretty well done. I thought so too. I don't want to spoil it, but I do want to say that it just there's a lot of movies on this list where as a parent I watch them and I just really want to go hug my kids afterwards. And this is the first one on the list to make me do that.
So my number 8 is a movie that I think you saw.
Okay.
And it's available now on HBO Max for anybody who missed it in theaters. The Menu.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Yeah.
Loved this movie. I will watch anything that Anya Taylor-Joy does. And Ralph Fiennes is also he's become one of these actors who, you know, he gets typecasted as a villain so many times that you forget how good of an actual actor he is. I just watched, you know, not to go off on a tangent, but I just watched because I watched The Banshees of Inisherin. I wanted to watch that filmmaker's other movie, so I finally watched In Bruges,
Oh, okay.
And Ray Fiennes is so funny in that movie. He's
Agreed.
one of my favorite uh, performances. And he was so kind of reserved in his role in this movie. And the way he commands the screen just with a clap. And I love Nicholas Hoult in this movie was so funny how like he's just hopelessly devoted to this chef no matter what the chef does. Hong Chow, uh, if it was up to me, she'd get a Best Supporting Actress nomination for this. She's so good. She's also great in The Whale, so she had a great year, Hong Chow. But this movie is directed by Mark Mylod. This is Anya Taylor-Joy and Ray Fiennes, and it's almost like this battle of wills as the movie continues.
Right.
And it doesn't really feel like you're watching a horror movie until the horror kind of starts to happen. And you almost feel like you're watching a version of like Midsummer or The Wicker Man, where you have this like restaurant on an island that you need to take like a ferry to get to. And it's this like super elite restaurant, and they serve this, it's a different menu every time, and there's all these courses, and you slowly start to realize what it is, what's going on. And I was so fascinated by this movie. And it's the type of movie that I feel like I'm going to watch a whole bunch more, which always adds to a movie going up on my list. If I feel like it has rewatchability, which I feel this movie does. And again, not spoiling the ending, but I think the ending is one of the best endings of the year. It reminded me of Samara Weaving sitting outside smoking a cigarette at the end of Ready or Not, covered in blood. And there's just this great scene at the end, and it's just such a weird movie, but such a really cool movie too.
Before, when I mentioned the thing about the children kind of paying the price, or the children suffering, I think that that's because like that's a general consensus thing. I think it's like in our collective unconsciousness of like, oh, what kind of future do our children have? Our children have a bleak future, right? I think another thing that's in our collective unconsciousness is, God, the rich fucking suck. Like, I wish someone would literally eat them. Like they deserve punishment. There has to be some kind of judgment, and at least in horror movies, we get that. The Menu is this great example of that. Shifting gears completely is my number 7, which is another movie on Shudder, Resurrection. So Resurrection is written and directed by Andrew Siemens, and it stars Rebecca Hall. Rebecca Hall was also on our list last year for The Night House. Rebecca Hall does a fantastic job as playing a woman at wit's end. A woman that is like frayed down, like a frayed rope, right? Until there's nothing left. Rebecca Hall is very good at that. And
I almost feel like, given her performance in this and The Night House, like I almost feel like, obviously, yeah, we know when it comes to awards, they tend to skip over horror for the most part. I almost feel like, okay, you know what, Rebecca Hall, take a break from horror, make a drama, get yourself acknowledged for your performances.
Right.
There's no reason that she shouldn't be in the conversation with Kate Blanchett and Michelle Yeoh for Best Actress this year for this role.
Agree.
She's so good. And I'm gonna not, to quote the great Kanye, I'm gonna let you finish, but I'm just gonna say this was the movie that I had tied with Watcher at number 5.
Oh, okay, good to know. Okay.
And basically I just figured you have 2 movies about women who feel basically alone because there's somebody after them, but there's also this kind of sense of, we don't really know, as the audience, we're not really sure what is after them. Is it in their mind? Are they just completely being broken down mentally, or is there an actual physical presence coming after them?
Yes.
And to me, again, just like with Barbarian and Fresh, I felt they were too similar to kind of leave one off, leave one on. So I grouped them together as my number 5. So there you go.
Yeah, there's another movie that I think is pretty high on your list, if not your number one, and it's very high on my list. I'm not going to say what it is, but it's a movie that has a 5-minute monologue where you are just hyper focused on this one female character. The thing is, I was like watching that recently, and I said, wait a minute, I've seen that this year too. I've seen it in this movie, in Resurrection. There's a sequence where it's just Rebecca Hall, and she's just doing a monologue. She's describing something that happened in the past, and it is like one of the most horrific things your imagination can run with. And in both sequences, in the other movie and in this, in Resurrection, the main character is going off saying this stuff, and then you're like, oh man, when they cut to the other person, the person they're talking to, it's going to be ridiculous what their reaction is, and it's so great in both cases. But you know, we don't often talk about this on our channel that much, but with horror, there's not that much of a focus on special effects. But it seems to me that a movie that has incredible performances can do just as well at the box office as a movie that has an incredible special effects budget. People really want to see people act. And Rebecca Hall is incredible in this movie. She turns in a performance. This is the kind of movie that people will be talking about. They'll also be talking about the movie that I mentioned before. Her performance is so good. One thing I also didn't want to neglect was that in The Night House and in this, there's a bit of like contorting that she does too. She like physically does things to her body that are painful to watch, and she does it to herself. A lot of this movie is like her doing horrible things to herself. It's very tough to watch, but it's really good. And I want to just point out, just before we move on, that Tim Roth is also in this movie, and he has this menacing presence, and it is because of him that she puts herself through all this suffering. So, so much of like the horror or the scariness of this movie is just in their dialogue. There's not actually a lot of like like suspense or stalking or like even horrific gory imagery, even though there might be some of that. There's actually a very disturbing scene in this movie that I don't want to talk about right now. But it just shows you that giving people things to think about in their mind and giving incredible performances are truly all you need to have a satisfying film or a film that you remember.
My number 7 is, we said franchises. It's a sequel, but it's not the sequel you might be thinking. It's Satan's Slaves Part 2, Communion. Joko motherfucking Anwar is one of the best modern horror filmmakers. He was on my list a year or so ago with the movie Impetigore. The original Satan Slaves was one of the scariest and best horror movies of the year that it came out. And he also, I think, wrote a movie called Queen of the Damned, which is also on Shudder, which is also sick and gross. And he uses a lot of Indonesian, I believe. I think he's Indonesian. And he uses a lot of like just real like almost folklore to create these like scary ass movies. And we did a big you, me, Mike Mangiorno, and I
Brian?
forgot who else, Derek Stockton.
Oh yes.
We did a talk about Evil Dead Rise.
Oh
The trailer.
Yeah.
And we both kind of said, like, there's already a movie that just came out about like possession and demons haunting an apartment complex. And this movie, it's about an Indonesian building that we learn is built on top of, you know, this kind of haunted place. And it's like basically where the poorest people live. It's a very, downtrodden building to the point where there's a flood, there's like a superstorm coming, and this building is built so low that it starts to flood, like the first 3 levels. So the people in the building can't get out. And
Yes.
there's this like demonic force that's just going from apartment to apartment. There are some of the best jump scares of the year. Charlotte was not watching this movie with me. She just happened to be in the room while I was watching it. And like she had her iPad and I just kept watching her eyes go like, and
Yeah.
then there's one particular jump scare. Well, all I'll say is garbage chute, and you'll know what I'm talking about. And Charlotte gave like her and I at the same time both went like, oh shit, like it, and it just doesn't let up from there. Let's put it this way: if you didn't see the original Satan Slaves, you can still watch this one and basically pick up anything that you missed.
Right.
There's these long scenes where there's bodies that have people that have died in the storm or drowned or they died in the building, and they cover their bodies up, and they put and every time the camera like pans to one side of the room and then pans back, it's such an easy tactic and it's going to happen, but you're still like, all right, it's going to pan back. The eyes are going to be open. There's going to be some kind of creepy face. It's not going to scare me. Oh, shit, did it again. And it's like, it never lets up.
Right.
And it's one of the longer horror movies of the year that I felt earned its runtime. It didn't bother me that it went long. It's about 2 hours and 10 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
And Joko Anwar he's a brilliant horror filmmaker.
Number 6 for me, just moving us along, because we're not even halfway there, is the movie Deadstream, which is another Shudder movie.
We are dead on. Number 6, Deadstream.
Nice. Such a funny movie. Danny and I make YouTube videos, and it's just so funny because this is all about a YouTuber. This movie is written, directed, and produced by a couple, husband and wife, Vanessa and Joseph Winter. And the main character, Sean, who is like pretty much the face of the movie in every single shot. Sean is Joseph Winter. So, very, very small group of people making this movie, hyper focused on one character. And it's just so great. It's cameras all around this guy, Sean, who is just so funny. His reactions to everything are so funny. He's a YouTuber that essentially takes on dares and does really challenging things, and he freaks out while doing them. One of the funniest things, I think I was actually at my mom's apartment where I am now, and we're watching the beginning where we just see his different little YouTube video challenges he does, and my mom was just cracking up laughing. It's so funny. And so his biggest challenge is to go stay in a haunted house overnight. And he's going to do it. Sean's going to do it because he basically was canceled for a time. And we don't know why. We eventually find out over the course of the movie. But just a really fun movie. I've heard a lot of people compare it to Evil Dead 2, but like an Evil Dead found footage movie. I think that's pretty accurate. But it's very different from everything else on my list. It's just this nice breath of fresh air. And once again, Shudder is giving us the goods.
Yeah. I'm one of the few people that champions, and we talked about this. We did a long review of Lake Mungo. I'm a huge fan of whatever you want to call it, found footage, docu-style, streaming horror, this where, I'm a huge fan of it. I think that it's such an easy genre to reinvent because the technology keeps changing.
Yeah.
And so like this movie is not just like a guy with a video camera running around. This guy is a streamer.
Right.
So it makes perfect sense why everything is being recorded. I liked that the movie didn't go too far in he got canceled, but we never really find out. Like the movie kind of leaves it ambiguous. Is he an asshole? who took something too far, like a Jake Paul, I don't even know, the Logan Paul kind of situation, or if it was just like a really bad misunderstanding. He seems like he could go either way, where he could be like this like kind of lovable loser type genuine guy who just wants people to like and support him,
right?
Or that he's willing to do literally anything for a laugh, and that includes doing some pretty bad stuff. But the movie kind of leaves that ambiguous, and I thought the movie was genuinely scary, and it was genuinely hilarious.
Yes.
And it's because of that it, I think it very fairly gets compared to Evil Dead 2, because when you have a scary, funny movie that involves a haunted house and possessions of sorts, and like evil spirits and incantations that you have to read out loud from a book, which is all part of this movie, it, you're going to draw comparisons to Evil Dead 2. And as long as you're going to be compared favorably, I think that's a good thing. And I really liked the way that they incorporate the technology, the streaming.
I hope you enjoyed the discussion that Danny and I had. Like I said in the beginning of the video, that was only entries 10 through 6. Next week, I'm going to post our entries for 5 through 1. So make sure that you subscribe to the Lastercast. And also, I'd like to know, do you agree with our picks? Are there movies that you think should make a top 10 list for 2022? Until next time, though, this is Pete, and we'll see you in a week.